The Trusted Digital Identity Bill is a global surveillance and control mechanism that profit-hungry corporations and power-mad politicians drafted and crafted. One Nation opposes this inhuman, dystopian future that the United Nations promotes as the Great Reset, and we condemn this Parliament for signing on to it.
I called for Australia to reject the World Economic Forum's Great Reset and instead mount a great resist. Just like the koalas being euthanized to make way for wind turbines, or damaged solar panels leaking toxic heavy metals into waterways, the United Nations net zero plan again involves killing the environment to save it. I've been speaking about the fear, the oppression and the inhuman cruelty of our COVID response since July 2020. I promised to hound down those responsible, and I will continue relentlessly to keep that promise.
You're about to be live with me, Senator Malcolm Roberts. Well, hi there. This is time for the weekly wrap-up from the only opposition party in Australia, the only party serving the Australian people. I don't know how today's going to go because I haven't practiced it. I've just been through it once. We've got quite a few items, as usual, and we work as a team, and people have contributed so much to the summary for the Productivity Roundtable, or the bullshit roundtable, whatever you want to call it. Look, before we start, just want to pass on some good news. The COVAX specimens are safe for now. They were due to be scrapped. They were said to be scrapped. There are 10,600 specimens people gave of bodily specimens, fluid specimens, blood specimens. People who've had the COVID injection and people who haven't had the COVID injection. It's one of the world's best potential studies, but they won't look at the damn stuff. Why is that? So they wanted to destroy it, and we wrote to the Premier, we wrote to the health officials, and they've agreed that they will keep the specimens under the conditions which the people who gave specimens guaranteed. Were guaranteed, and that'll mean that they have to keep them until at least 2028. Meanwhile, we'll keep working on it, and we're building international relations with research centres overseas to put pressure on the government to start doing the research. Why don't they want to look at the COVID injection impacts? It's strange, isn't it? So if they haven't looked at it, why not? And if they have looked at it, why aren't they disclosing their results? So let's have a look at the Productivity Roundtable. So I'm all for better hours for workers, providing productivity increases can pay for it. So the union bosses have put up a proposal for a 4-day work week. You know, I was around in the coal industry when we went from a 40-hour week to a 35-hour week. I was working at the coalface and later as a mine manager. So we went from 40 hours per week to 35. And, you know, people told me it was really just a gambit for increased wages, increased hourly rate, because they were going to get paid the same amount for 35 as they were for 40. So the employers had to wear it. So that's what happens. So as I said, I'm all for better hours for workers, providing productivity increases can pay for that. Now, productivity increases benefit everyone, real productivity increases. Productivity increases are not about working harder. They're about working smarter, better investment, working more freely, more easily, not harder or for less wages. There are two ways you can increase productivity. You can increase the output and keep all the other wages, etc., the same, which means you have a higher productivity. Or you can cut wages and leave the output the same. That increases productivity. Productivity is just a way of measuring efficiency, converting raw materials, inputs into outputs. So we remember that each of us is not only a worker, we're a customer. And so we want services for 7 days a week. We want to work as little as possible, but we want services 7 days a week, no matter how long we work or when we work. So real productivity increases benefit everyone because we produce more and we get more benefits as workers for it, and the customers get a better price, and the business owners get a better share of the profit. So productivity, real productivity increases benefit everyone. But the union bosses, out of touch and remote, are now pushing hard for a 4-day work week. They say it will increase productivity, but who believes that? No one. What's the real reason behind a 4-day work week? Well, think about this. Regardless of regulation, the week is 5 days long and it will have to be worked. Actually, it's now increasingly in retail and hospitality a 7-day work week, 7-day week. And we're part of a global economy, no longer just sitting on an island tucked down in the southern hemisphere. Australia is part of a global community, and over 1,000 years of working behaviour is not going to be changed because union bosses demand it. What happens to the 5th day? What happens to the 6th day, the 7th day? It'll probably be treated as if it were a weekend, a 3-day weekend. That means weekend rates, higher wages. And just as already happens on weekends, when small businesses can't afford the extra rates, companies shut their doors, jobs are lost, productivity slumps, and we lose even more Australian businesses. If it's not done correctly, that's the reality. Productivity improvements benefit everyone. It's not just about stealing an extra day off. It's about making sure that businesses can survive. Because without businesses, we don't have employers. Without employers, we don't have jobs. So we haven't practiced this, haven't coordinated it, so we'll see what happens with the graphs that we've got lined up for you. Businesses are already struggling. As of July 2025, 88 close for every 100 that open. So every 100 businesses that open, 88 close. Only 12 survive. 12% survive. In the 2025 financial year, 14,105 businesses shut. 27% more than last year. Almost 27% more than last year. In 2024, 505,474 new businesses were registered. 443,395 closed. That's 15,238 more than in 2023. So we're having huge increases in businesses shutting. We have a record level of small and medium businesses collapsing. A 13% decline in the registration of sole traders. A 4% decline in partnerships. On top of this, the tax office is threatening to ramp up its enforcement of debt collection, seeking $105 billion in company tax debt. The tax office is gutless. It doesn't go after the big multinationals. It doesn't go after the big companies because they've got deep pockets. They can afford to fight the taxation office's accountants with their own accountants. They can afford to fight the taxation office's lawyers with their own lawyers. They've got deep pockets. They hire the best barristers, the best king's counsellors. So they go after small business. And small business gets hammered. And they can't really fight what's going on. We've seen the ATO, the Australian Tax Office. That's another story for another day. You really crucify small businesses. It looks good for the ATO, is doing something, but they're picking on the wrong businesses. And what we've got basically is a policeman, a prosecutor, a judge, and a jury, all in the ATO. We need to have a separate parts of the ATO are separate entities, so that whoever does the investigation hands it over to someone else to do the prosecution and someone else to do the judging of it. That's not fair at the moment. During COVID, the ATO went soft on businesses, so they were told to be soft on businesses, allowing the businesses to rack up debts with the ATO to keep their staff employed. And now those businesses are in dire straits. 2025 under Labor is the worst fiscal year ever recorded for insolvencies. So now, of course, the ATO and the government talk about raising taxes. How does this work with Victoria's mandatory 2 days work from home? A 4-day work week, 2 days from home, productivity? Let's go through some specific things from the Roundtable. Treasurer Jim Chalmers has finished his tax summit. Productivity Roundtable. The government is... let me tell you a story about Bob Hawke. I read an interesting article when I was younger, and it was about Bob Hawke, and the way Bob Hawke introduced something that would not be liked by people, not be liked by the citizens, was controversial, would get their backs up. The way he did it, he would say, "No, we're never going to do that, never going to do it." Then he would say, 3 months later, he'd say, that's worth looking at. Then a few months later, he would say, I think we should do some studies on that. Then a few months later, I've got a primary position on this. Meanwhile, he's conditioned everyone to accept it. And then he comes out a few months later and just says, here it is. Here's what we're going to do. And he just deals with the hows and gets on with it. But the government is now staring down a $1 trillion national debt this year. And by the way, who created that? Who created the debt? Morrison's Liberal National Party government, and Labor has increased the debt because of this spending. And by the way, we have identified in One Nation $90 billion plus that can be saved and improve government efficiency and government function and accountability in this country. It was part of our election policies. We still have it as our policy. But what I'm getting to is that Liberals, Nationals, Labor have created the debt. Now, we approved JobSeeker in the early days of the COVID response in 2020, March 2020. We approved the JobSeeker payments, and the same for JobKeeper. JobSeeker was on the basis of that we approved them both on the basis that we would be given a data and some plan. We never got the data until eventually, after 12 months of trying from the Prime Minister and the Premier of Queensland, I asked in Senate estimates, and we found out that COVID was actually low to moderate in severity. Low to moderate. It did not need what was spent. So anyway, how are they going to pay for $1 trillion national debt? How will they do that? People have suggested cutting spending. Well, that's a valid option. There are many options to cut spending. We've identified $90 billion of savings that would improve government for the people of this country. Now, they've said no to cutting spending. So now the options, and that spending is not necessarily on the people, it's on some of the functions, some of the departments, massive departments, that are actually destroying the country. So the savings would not only save $90 billion in spending, it would improve government efficiency and government effectiveness and government service. And it would improve the livability for the people that the government is supposed to be serving but is really knobbling and crippling. So what we've seen is no spending cuts on the up for debate. What they want is, the options are raiding retirement super funds, grave robbing using inheritance taxes. Grave robbing. I said that correctly, and I'll explain why I said that term. New road taxes, new wealth taxes, taxing the family home, and raising the taxes on profits of every Australian business. Sounds productive? Like hell. That's not productive. That's not productivity. That's slugging the workers, slugging the people who are contributing to the economy more than ever. That's destroying productivity. Actually destroying productivity. Look at an article in the Australian Financial Review titled, "Chalmers Flags Super Tax Raid to Fix an Unfair System." The authors are Phil Curry and Michael Reid. They say, quote, "Treasurer Jim Chalmers has opened the door for an assault on superannuation concessions and other wealth taxes in exchange for lower income tax by declaring intergenerational equity will drive reforms that could be taken to the next election or implemented beforehand." Why the hell are we bargaining on reducing income tax? Sure, we need to reduce income tax, but there are many other ways of doing that. We should not be saying reduce our income tax and we'll pay more somewhere else. That's just a different way of skinning the cat. The cat still gets bloody well skinned, and that means that taxpayers are getting skinned in this country. Lowering income tax increases productivity and helps alleviate the cost of living. Wouldn't that be productive? Just lower income taxes. That's one of the things we said. Income splitting. A family with at least one dependent child can split the income between the working spouse and the non-working stay-at-home spouse and cut the income tax. That's productive. The Treasurer said, according to this article, that there was, quote, "no clear consensus on specific tax reform." See the Bob Hawke trick he's playing? He's sowing seeds. That's what this whole roundtable exercise was about. It wasn't about productivity. It was about a tax summit. It was about introducing concepts for tax to get more money out of your pocket. Whereas our policies in the last federal election would have given $40 billion back to people and put more money in people's pockets. $40 billion more in people's pockets from a $90 billion saving in government spending. But we'll continue with Curry and Reid's quotes. "I think our tax system," Chalmers said, "I think our tax system is imperfect, and one of its most troubling imperfections is best seen through an intergenerational lens, which is why we take our responsibilities to the coming generation seriously." That's what Jim Chalmers said. Jim Chalmers said. Is this a pitch to steal from the old and give to the young? Yes, it is. We've seen the Labor government wrongly and cruelly telling Australians that boomers and pensioners are to blame for the economic problems facing young people. That is a complete lie. It's really government policy that's to blame. Government policy. You can rattle them off. We found $90 billion worth of cost savings. We found energy system being crippled. That is not due to the boomers. The boomers are largely opposing this rubbish about net zero. Net zero, immigration, rampant immigration, destroying the housing market, blowing the housing market up, creating housing unaffordability and homelessness. It's really government policy that's to blame. Older generations did nothing wrong. I know I've got grey hair, I'm an older generation, but we did nothing wrong. And yet the older generation are being treated as scapegoats. So they're going. But look, the scapegoats are just for the first 5 minutes or so. Once they install taxes on wealth not earned, not generated, not actually received, once they tax the grave, tax dead people from the grave, once they tax things that are not yet earned income, and once they tax superannuation at a higher rate for those with more than $3 million in super, then what they do is they introduce those basic concepts, which are wrong. They're flat wrong. Then they spread it down to lower and lower incomes. That's why how bracket creep got on. And we're the only party that has voted to oppose bracket creep. So this is classic communism, classic new Labor and Greens. The old Labor Party was socialist, but it would not have dreamt of doing these things because it looked after workers. This is stealing from workers. Classic new Labor and Greens. The Labor Party is no longer the Labor Party. Divide and set one group against the other. That's classic Labor and Greens. Create a victim and then look after the perpetrators, tax them higher, and look after the victims so the victims vote for you. That's all the Greens and the Communist Labor Party does. It's a pay the rent style message, just like the Aboriginal Voice was about paying the rent. If you saved, in other words, worked hard and acted responsibly, you, according to the Labor Party and the Greens, have stolen wealth from the younger generations. That's the message being taught to our children, your children at school. If you earned it, you stole it. That's a classic communist approach. If you earned it, you stole it. You're bad. If the Treasurer takes money from super funds and hands that money out, well, that's not really stealing. That's tackling inequity. It's called communism, and I've called it communism repeatedly. This is not how intergenerational relationships should be. This is not how you build and drive an economy. This is how you destroy an economy, destroy a country. And we're picking up increasingly people in the community saying the country is going to hell. It certainly is. This is how you tear families apart and isolate people from their grandparents and parents who love them. Parents and grandparents love their children. And then to teach children, and this also is a system from the government that teaches children that hard work ends in the government taking your assets. How the hell can that be productive? How the hell can that encourage future productivity? It can't. It destroys it. Destroys incentive, destroys initiative, destroys creativity. Fundamentals for human progress. This Labor Party is even worse than the Liberal Party. Meanwhile, tax rates for companies with turnovers of $1 billion or more stays the same. I'll give you some figures about that later on that I first learned about in 1996, 2010 and 2016. I met the man who, from the ATO, Deputy Commissioner, who told me the figures. So the tax rate for companies with turnovers of $1 billion or more stays the same. Tax the rich? Well, the Treasurer isn't doing that. Although all businesses, that includes mum and dad, small businesses, might see an extra 5% tax on cash flow. 5%! Imagine what that does to a struggling Aussie business. How many people will lose their jobs over this? This is insane. Absolutely insane. The Treasurer's taxes seem targeted at voting blocks rather than productivity. They want to look after their own seats and keep their bums on the shiny ministerial leather chairs. That's all they're after, and the carpeting in the ministers' offices. The taxes seem targeted at voting blocks, not productivity. This is not in the national interest. It is not in the national interest. There'll be some groups who'll say, great, and they'll vote for Labor. That's what it's about. they will rue the day, because this will actually come bite them in the backside in a very short time. Not even the family home is safe. Perhaps copying the British system, where the Chancellor of the Exchequer, the Treasurer, Rachel Reeves, wants a mansion tax on homes sold for more than £1.5 million. The ABC, the good old ABC, ran an article describing Australia as a homeowners' welfare state. A homeowners' welfare state. Because the ABC says, quote, "The amount of privilege homeowners are given is really quite extraordinary." The amount of privilege homeowners are given is really quite extraordinary. Interest payments on your home loan that's your residence are not tax deductible in Australia. They are tax deductible in America. They are tax deductible in America because Americans realise that the home is very, very important. The Treasury says there's $50 billion per year in revenue that could be found if they stop exempting owner-occupied housing from capital gains tax. So see that little hint there, they want to introduce capital gains tax on your owner-occupied home. So you'll be paying capital gains tax if it gets through. And there's $50 billion in revenue that could be found. Notice how they're talking about this $50 billion can be found in revenue. $40 billion here, $10 billion there, $100 billion there in revenue. Where are the spending issues? We've identified $90 billion of waste. So it's too bad if you remortgage that house and can't pay the capital gains tax. Too bad if you are relying on that money to downsize. So what happens is, rather than before you even get the money, it's taxed because of the capital gains on your owner-occupied, the residential home. Now, the Australia Institute is calling for a 2% wealth tax on people worth more than $5 million, including their home and super, saying, unbelievably, that Australia is a low-tax country. Try telling that to the people in Brisbane. Try telling that to the people in Barcaldine. Australia is not a low-tax country. It's an absurdly high-tax country. And when you think about the policies that are driven like net zero, we're an incredibly badly taxed country. Here's what I meant about the grave-robbing tax. The worst tax of all, inheritance tax. Grave robbing. It's where grieving families get to watch the tax department pick the pockets of their loved ones. In Britain, families already have to watch the government walk away with family assets while grieving. You will own nothing, and anything you do own is seized. What kind of world is this? It's a dystopian world. Young people can't afford homes, can't afford to have children, can't even start a business to save themselves. Their parents, their grandparents want to help them through handing their children whatever wealth is left when they die. So they want to hand the home over. They'll have to sell the home to pay for the capital gains tax. So, except that now there's a new war, a war on intergenerational wealth, as if it is a bad thing that families work hard, are productive members of society, and live independently from government assistance. Now, the Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, should commend families that saved responsibly and passed that wealth down to their children. No, not Jim, not Anthony Albanese. They see people's money, your money, our money, as a way to solve his bad budgeting, his overspending, his lack of courage, because he won't face up and look at the spending cuts that are needed and that are essential. His stupid and dishonest net zero policy, he won't look at these. Actually, it's not Jim Chalmers' net zero policy. It's the UN's net zero policy. It's just his Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, is too gutless and just follows meekly, after Morrison followed meekly and adopted net zero after promising not to. Who pays for all this? Who pays? We the people pay. Who gets our money? Parasitic billionaires and predatory foreign corporations. What do you think of this? Well, here are some Facebook comments that followed the Roundtable comments. Quote, "My home is not an investment property for politicians." Well said. Another quote, "Another reason the government has encouraged the plethora of retirement schemes and investments for the little people is that it has made their assets a lot more visible." Exactly. These are the best kind of assets for the tax collector. Exactly. Another quote, "Did anyone suggest cutting spending at this roundtable?" We didn't hear about it. If they did. Another quote, "When Labor run out of money, they come after yours." Remember Margaret Thatcher? She said socialism is wonderful until you run out of spending other people's money. And they will run out. This is like getting a candy, a lolly, and then being happy only to find out there's no money left for anything else. And remember, while Labor is making this worse, it's the Liberals who started this mess with a huge budget deficit, huge waste of money, $500 billion blown on COVID when when the chief medical officer advised me personally in writing, in a graph, with hard numbers, that the severity of COVID was low to moderate, and we blew up the country on the basis of that. And they wonder why I won't stop chasing them on it. Here's another new tax. Maybe some justification for this, but there's another new tax, and that's on EVs, electric vehicles. There's an article in news.com.au. Quote, that's the headline. Treasurer Jim Chalmers hails consensus on new tax that will be phased in starting with EV vehicles. See how they've got consensus? It must be right. It's a road user charge to replace petrol excise. Fair enough. There was a lot of support in the room for road user charging, said Chalmers. Do petrol drivers have to pay both? What about hybrids? Is it just for EVs? New South Wales suggests that hybrids pay the fuel excise and get slogged 80% of a road user charge. What happened was they brought in petrol excise, or increased petrol excise, on the excuse many years ago that it would be going to a road maintenance. Labor Prime Minister, or maybe he was Treasurer at the time, Paul Keating, broke that connection, and fuel excise goes into general revenue, consolidated revenue. That's it. There's no maintenance funding, and so this is probably a dubious thing that'll go straight into general revenue, consolidated revenue. So the Treasurer has a message for all those who bought EVs thinking they would be cheaper. They're not cheaper, we know that for a fact. But anyway, we bought it on the lies that were told that EVs are cheaper. Quote Chalmers, the status quo won't be sustainable over the next decade or two. As more and more people get off petrol cars and onto EVs, we've got to make sure the tax arrangements support investment in roads. EVs are heavier. They should pay more. They do more damage to the road. So what we've got is EVs being taxed. Will petrol and diesel be taxed? Australians paid nearly $16 billion in net fuel to excise in 23-24. They will pay $67.6 billion between 26 and 27. 67.6, nearly $70 billion between 26 and 27. So if you're wondering what the Liberal Party shadow treasurer had to say about all this plotting to raise taxes, Ted O'Brien said, quote, I finished those 3 days more optimistic about the progress that we can make together than I was at the start, he said during a press conference on Thursday evening. People came with their ideas. They came with a lot of goodwill, a lot of expertise, a lot of experience, and they provided their views to us in very generous ways. Oh, really, Ted? You are sounding more and more like the Labor Party every day. We already know that you're the Uni Party. Your policies are almost identical. I posted on social media yesterday, and I'll read it to you. The people at the Productivity Roundtable aren't allowed to bring in phones or devices. They don't trust them. Those same people are claiming they know how to regulate AI while writing on notepads and handing out paper copies to each other. They can't handle the technology, but they want to regulate how other people use it. Here are the figures that I got from the Australian Taxation Office as a Deputy Commissioner of Taxation for large companies and foreign international matters. So he dealt with international matters and large companies. He said these figures in 1996 in the newspaper he was quoted, in 2010 again, and when he retired I met with him personally. So I had a friend, John McRae, who told me about Jim Kalali making these comments. So I tracked him down and he agreed to meet with me in Canberra. That was before I became a senator. It was January or February 2016. He said, 90% of Australia's large companies are foreign owned and since 1953 have paid little or no taxes. 90% of Australia's large companies are foreign owned and since 1953 have paid little or no taxes. That was because of an agreement, the double taxation recognition that Menzies Liberal government brought in 1953. And then the Hawke government also made it easy for foreign companies in the gas fields to escape paying huge amounts of tax and pay virtually nothing in tax. In Japan, a few years ago, the proportion of foreign-owned companies in Japan is 2.5%. The proportion in America and the proportion in Britain is around about 12.5%. I don't know what the latest figures are. So in other words, we've got a huge proportion of foreign-owned companies, 90%. They pay little or no company tax. Think about that. They're getting off scot-free. They come here, use our police force, our education services. They use our infrastructure. They use our roads. They use our schools. They use our hospitals. They use our defence forces if they're North West Shelf gas. They're using us. They're exporting our resources, and they pay bugger all for it, and they hardly tax at all for it. But think about something else. A foreign company comes down here and buys a biscuit maker like Arnott's, which used to be Australian, or buys a manufacturer. It then does not have to pay company tax. It can get away with not paying company tax. That makes it 30% ahead of the Australian-owned company. So what will happen to the Australian-owned company? It'll either go bust or it'll fall away, and then it'll get snapped up by foreigners as well. So we've now got our country in foreigners' hands. This is under the Liberal Labor government, the Liberal Labor Uni Party for the last 40 years. Think about this. These are figures from John McRae, who got them from a public servant back in late 1990s, early 2000s. I haven't been able to track it down. I haven't updated it, so they may not be correct. I suspect they're even worse now. But a person on the average income in this country, a family earning the average income, would pay 68% of her income to governments in the form of fees, rates, levies, surcharges, special fees, special levies, taxes. 68%. That means you are working from basically Monday morning, if you were doing a 5-day week, to Thursday mid-morning, smoko, to pay government. You live on what's left for Thursday and Friday. That's what you live on. And it can't be far off the mark, because the Treasurer recently, what was the name of that? Joe Hockey. Joe Hockey said 50% is typically paid to governments in taxes. Now, if you add the fees, you add the special levies, 68% seems quite reasonable. It's unreasonable as an amount, but it seems reasonably accurate. And think about this. Of that 32% that you've got left, which is less than a third, when you buy a loaf of bread, 50% of the cost of that bread, the price of that bread, is taxes. So there's an effective tax rate of 100%. 100%. 50% of the price of a house, if you can afford a house, is taxes. That's been verified recently by the real estate institutes and politicians. 50% is taxes, 45, 50%. That's an effective tax rate of 100%. Fuel, these figures depend upon the price of fuel, but I can remember them some years ago being 70% of the price of fuel is taxes, excise taxes. That's an effective tax rate of 230%. So when you get to keep 32%, you're paying more tax, again, through what you buy. So a woman or a man gets up in their house, which they paid 50% tax rate for, makes some sandwiches, which they paid 50% tax for, jumps in their car, drives to work, and they pay 70% taxes before they even get to work. That's where our country's headed. One Nation is the only party that put forward clear, decisive policies for cutting taxation, tax reform. We have them for the short term. That went into the election, and we're still pushing those into the election platform. We're still pushing those. They're still our policies. We've got policies in mind for the medium term, and we've got policies in mind for ultimate comprehensive tax reform to get back to a fairer taxation system. Only One Nation. So that's the tax summit. The Productivity Roundtable. It was just a show to introduce and get the public ready for massive tax increases and unfair taxes. Right, the other big news of the week for many people was that Senator Warwick Stacey ill health and his resignation on Tuesday. We were very, very sad for Warwick. I was also very sad for me and Pauline because Warwick and Tyrone were a breath of fresh air in the Senate the first 2 weeks. They really are very strong men, conviction, integrity, honesty. They stand up, they say what they think, and they're wonderful. They did a good job in the Senate over the first 2 weeks. So we're very sad to see Warwick go. We hope he can sort out his issues. He's got many, many different symptoms, so he's really got some issues going on. So I admire his courage. It would have been embarrassing. It would have been hard for him to resign, but he did it because he wants to make sure that whoever's there is functioning properly. His replacement is being sorted out now. Pauline Hanson and James Ashby will vet the candidates, and ultimately it's Pauline who makes the decision. So I know she'll pick a very good person because she's so conscious of making sure, learning from the mistakes in the past of who she has selected or who the party has selected. This one will be a good one. Okay, on to some good news. The Australians for Better Government invited me to give a speech at a conference on the Gold Coast on Sunday, the 3rd of August. I did a 35-minute speech. It was very comprehensive and got a standing ovation for it. So I was touched by that, but it was good because it was very comprehensive about, well, the speech, I'll tell you more about it. The video quality was not great. So the Australian for Better Government executive asked me to repeat it. And I did so yesterday. That's going to be released. It has been released. You'll get the link when it's on social media pretty soon. There's a lot of material in it, but the audience was absolutely amazed at what I shared with them. It explains so much about net zero, so much about our country, so much about our governance of our country. So as I said, I got a standing ovation, and for that I'm grateful. But it really was a joy to deliver because we need to educate people. Now, I've been asked to also share with you some, what's the time here? Wow, it's 3:43 already. Okay. I'm going to read some quotes that I've been asked to share from my speech. We're told the biggest purchase of our life is our house. That's wrong. Taxes, fees and levies make our biggest purchase government. Are we getting value for government? The direct cost of government is taxes. The direct cost of government waste is excessive taxes. The indirect cost of government is failed or destructive policies, choking productive capacity, driving waste, killing initiative. 120 years ago, our country had the world's highest per capita income. What the hell happened? Another quote started with, let's look at the relationship between science and our science body, the CSIRO. So first, I'll take another quote out of my speech. So what's science? When done properly, science investigates and explains our physical world. Science is the systematic, objective, rational study of our physical world through observation, experimentation, and testing of theories against the empirical data. That's the measured data. Hard data in logical scientific points that prove cause and effect. It's not just hard data. It's hard data in logical point proving cause and effect. Scientific proof needs data, logical points, and needs to be proving cause and effect. Now, graduate engineers like I are trained in science because we apply the science. Scientists develop new discoveries about the planet and about materials, and then engineers take that science and implement it. We're the ones who make sure that bridges stay up, that buildings don't collapse, that airliners don't fall out of the sky, that space shuttles don't fall out of the sky. We're the ones that apply the science. We understand science. We understand scientific proof because we've got to prove things, because that's what enables us to keep people safe. So my science training includes geology and atmospheric gases, carbon dioxide. Two of the most important topics of climate science. Geology for understanding past climate, and atmospheric gases for understanding how the atmosphere behaves and how the climate behaves. And also statistics. I've done statistics at the University of Chicago, so I understand statistics. So now let's go back to that picture. Let's look at the relationship between science and the CSIRO. My 2013 Freedom of Information request revealed that no CSIRO chief executive had sent a climate report to any MPs, ministers or parliament. None. My 2013 letter to the CSIRO chief executive and to the head of CSIRO's climate team produced no scientific proof from the CSIRO. None at all. In 2016, in the Senate, in my first action, requested CSIRO's climate team to provide scientific proof that human carbon dioxide needs to be cut. That's the basis of every climate and energy policy. At the CSIRO's first 3-hour presentation to me, the CSIRO's climate chief stated their organisation has never said that carbon dioxide produced by human activity is a danger. What he said was, quote, determination of danger is a matter for public and politicians, end of quote. And yet here we have, for the last 40 years, politicians, a whole Canberra bubble full of them, saying that carbon dioxide is a danger, and they claim that CSIRO advised them. That is a lie. That is misinformation and disinformation. Another quote. The UN has no scientific proof for its claims of warming and climate change. I've been through their reports. And no specific effect of cutting human carbon dioxide. Thus, the UN has no basis for climate and energy policies cutting human carbon dioxide. The UN has no scientific basis for its temperature targets, initially fabricated at 2 degrees Celsius and later 1.5 degrees Celsius. Just figures plucked out of the air. And get this one. Both the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change chair and the Prime Minister, Kevin Rudd, claimed that 4,000 scientists said in the UN's 2007 report that human carbon dioxide caused global warming. Yet the UN report, when you look at their own figures in that damn UN report, their figures show only 5 UN reviewers endorsed the claim, and there's doubt they were even scientists. I'll move on to another quote from my speech about the UN. The senior UN bureaucrat, Maurice Strong, fabricated both global warming and later climate change. His stated life's aims were to deindustrialize Western civilization and install an unelected socialist global government. He said, quote, humanity is the enemy. So you and I are the UN's enemy. Maurice Strong, he concocted global warming. He fabricated both global warming and climate change. He was a co-founder and director of the Chicago Climate Exchange, seeking to make trillions of dollars from global trading of carbon dioxide credits. Now do you see what's going on? Worse, on a separate crime, American police sought Maurice Strong for crimes, and he went into self-exile in China, a major beneficiary of the West's climate and energy policies. They use our coal, they build wind turbines and solar panels, ship them to us, but they use largely coal, nuclear and hydro. UN senior climate bureaucrats like Figueres and Edenhofer admit the climate agenda is not about the environment. It's about changing society and economics. Quote, their words, a new world economic order. It's all about control and wealth transfer from we the people to globalist corporations, investment funds, banks, aligned billionaires in the UN. I'll move on to the next quote. And I've written thousands of letters to these people and I've got nothing back in the way of scientific proof. No university, no scientific society, no scientific journal, no agency, no government, no journalists, no non-government organisation, no Greenpeace, not WWF, not Climate 200, no celebrity, no company, no industry group, no politician anywhere has provided scientific proof of human-induced climate change. Federal government energy agencies and departments currently crippling Australia's energy grid have never provided scientific proof, nor specific scientific basis for policy. I've asked them in Senate estimates and elsewhere, and they have not provided it. I've asked politicians, ministers, Liberal and Labor, they have not provided it. I conclude that some climate academics are really activists misrepresenting climate science while having substantial conflicts of interest, including being on government payrolls. Last quote from my speech. Get government out of people's way. Shrink the federal government. Bulldoze Canberra, a self-perpetuating, productivity-killing parasite. We need to get government back to enabling people to fulfil their potential. I detest politicians killing our country and stifling people. We need to curtail politicians. And we need to release the people, freeing people to use our inherent personal enterprise. We all want to restore our country. So there's some quotes from 30-odd minute speech. It'll be released, if it's not already released from our office, it'll be released tomorrow. Oh, and speaking of climate and energy, this is from the Senate website. Select Committee on Information Integrity on Climate Change and Energy. On 30th of July 2025, the Senate appointed a select committee to be known as the Select Committee on Information Integrity on Climate Change and Energy to inquire into the prevalence and impacts of misinformation and disinformation which relates to climate change and energy. The committee is due to present its final report by Wednesday the 4th of February. The closing date for submissions is Friday the 12th of September. This, you'll notice from the wording, is not just about climate change and energy. It's about information integrity, which is code words. Well, they don't even use code words. Misinformation and disinformation, which relates to climate change and energy. We know where the disinformation and misinformation comes from. It's not from the skeptics, it's from the government and the people making money out of it. So it's about reintroducing the misinformation, disinformation bill, which One Nation defeated by getting the people, informing the people, awakening the people. Morrison introduced it. Labor Party introduced it for a vote. And then while they were debating it, they chucked it out because the people under our leadership were revolting against it. We always knew they would bring it back, so here it comes. This is the Greens working with their communist partners, the Labor Party, to get the grounds for a misinformation and disinformation bill, so they think, a censorship bill in February this year. February coming up, rather. The core issue is we're the only party that makes policies based on the data. My team and I have published a Substack article on the USA Environmental Protection Agency's new report on climate, which is riddled with true science. And they show that what the UN is saying, what the Labor Party is doing, what the Liberal Party is doing in this country is not based on science. It contradicts the science. So you can see that article summarising the USA report on my Substack. Just Google Senator Malcolm Roberts on Substack and then subscribe for free. I think I've said enough. Let's open it up for questions, comments. Oh, hang on. We're on Rumble, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, X, a couple of others in there too. We're also on TikTok. We've only recently joined TikTok. Our numbers are growing. We're up to 250,000 already, 250,000 likes. So that's very encouraging. So we can see that that's reaching a different audience. And speaking of younger people, Young Nation has been formed. It's for people 18 to 35 years of age who want to get more involved in politics, want to get more involved in supporting, helping One Nation, making people aware. So it's for people, as I said, from 18 years of age to 35 years of age. I'm very lucky. I've got 4 wonderful people in our electorate office, all young, and they're driving this. They're now working very closely with head office, and head office fully supportive. Pauline Hanson has thrown her weight behind it, so see more of that. So just go to our party website and track down Young Nation and put in an expression of interest, and someone will get hold of you. And by the way, we've started forming branches, and head office will be not restructured, but have an extra person appointed to guide and support the formation of parties. Any questions? See if I can get back to the website. Any questions? Hi from Biggin, good place to live, Biggin, beautiful. How's the Abattoir going? Lancelot think, oh, you're often here. Thanks, mate. The economic summit was a complete joke. Did the cost of energy get a mention? I would doubt it. I think they would probably hit it. But look, I don't make comments about things I don't know, so I don't know. But the cost of energy, I'm guessing, would not have been discussed. Yet it's the most important thing for productivity. It is the most important thing for productivity apart from people. That's why you raised the question, right? As you often say, the Liberals started but Labor implements it. Exactly, Dorothy, thank you. The man who did the most damage to this country's energy policy is the man who the Liberals trot out at every election, good old honest Johnny. John Howard's government introduced the renewable energy target. The government stole farmers' property rights to comply with the UN Kyoto Protocol, and then since then Labor in Queensland have run roughshod over farmers' property rights. He introduced the first policy for a carbon dioxide emissions trading scheme, carbon tax. What was the other one? Oh, they introduced the national electricity market, which is really a national bureaucratic racket. You can't have a market when it's controlled by bureaucrats. That's not a market. That's a diktat. So the renewable energy target mandated a minimum amount of solar and wind in our energy mix, and since then Labor has grown that. The safeguard mechanism was first introduced by Malcolm Turnbull and Greg Hunt. The Paris Agreement was agreed to by Tony Abbott. Yes, Tony Abbott. Ratified the following year by Malcolm Turnbull. Net zero was the opposition, the government under Scott Morrison in the lead up to the 2019 election said that there would not be a net zero. Around 18 months later, Scott Morrison, the same Prime Minister, said that he agreed, he signed up for UN net zero after coming back from the UN's Conference of Parties conference in Glasgow, which is their climate fest. So every major policy has been introduced by the Liberal Party and ramped up then by the Labor Party. You're absolutely right, Dorothy. Christine says, small business is already under so much pressure. You're absolutely correct on that. I'm struggling with additional wages, super guarantee up, workers' comp, but selling prices cannot go up at the same time. That's right, because you're where the rubber hits the road, rubber meets the road. You've got an interface with the customer, and if you put up prices and others don't, then you're in strife. Yes, that's where the reward comes, but it's also where the pain can be. And you're right. During COVID response under the Liberals, who supposedly support business, they shut small businesses. They shut hardware stores in shopping centres, suburban shopping centres, and yet you could get an injection while you're getting your sausage at Bunnings. You could get a COVID injection. All around the world, the same policies were put in place. That's the Western world, I should say. Small businesses shut, restricted, but the virus could not threaten you in large businesses like Bunnings and Coles. You know, it was just insane. That was to knock out small business. So congratulations if you're still going. Oh, Cade, Ryan, you're absolutely correct. Too many public sector workers, bureaucrats, and the red tape. And the green tape, and the black tape, and the blue tape. What's blue tape? Blue tape is UN tape. There's a lot of blue tape in this country. Public sector workers. Murray Watt, I've forgotten what he was minister for when he said this. He's been minister for three things, I think, so far. But anyway, he said that Albanese government has created so many thousands of jobs. He's correct. 82% of those jobs are in the public service. You know, we need some public servants, and the ones that are well managed do a good job. But 82% public service of new hires under Labor have been public servants. That is feeding off the rest of the productive economy. So what that means is the percentage of productive workers is declining, and the percentage of people hanging on is increasing. Then the people on welfare, our immigration standards, letting people in here to get PBS, Medicare, the other benefits, welfare. That's just insane. We're bringing people in here and treating them and rewarding them for doing nothing and exploiting the system. This is not the way we live in Australia, not the way we behave. Hi there, Ree. Can't see you behind your glasses. Don't laugh. You're absolutely correct. You know, when I was a kid, I must have had a warped sense of imagination. But I can remember exactly where I was walking. I was walking in the garden in a house. We lived in the bush. And I can remember being near a palm tree and a plum tree. And I thought to myself, the ultimate tax would be a tax on air. That's exactly what the carbon dioxide tax is all about. It's a tax on air. Carbon dioxide, you take in air that contains 0.04% carbon dioxide. Yeah, that's all. There's bugger all of it because it's scientifically called a trace gas because there's bugger all of it. You take in air at 0.04% and you exhale it at 5%, 4 to 5%, which is 100 to 125 times more. 100 to 125 times more. You've produced carbon dioxide just by breathing. Koalas produce carbon dioxide. Those cuddly koalas, they're destroying the planet according to the Greens and the Labor Party and the Liberal Party and the Nationals and the Teals. The reason I'm saying that is that I know an Australian consultant. I met him a few years ago. He went to Britain as part of a deal with the Tony Blair's government to introduce a carbon dioxide tax on businesses and a carbon credit trading scheme, an emissions trading scheme. And while he was there, he was asked just before he left by the Prime Minister what was the chance of getting a personal carbon dioxide tax. Now, I'm only a little guy. I don't exhale much carbon dioxide. But you big fellas, look out, you'll be taxed even more than I am. So this is where it's heading. It's all about control and wealth transfer. They will tax the air you breathe. You're producing carbon dioxide, J11, and so am I. So we'll be taxed the air we breathe. If carbon dioxide is that bad, it's not bad at all. It's essential for all life on the planet. It's nature's essential trace atmospheric gas. It's not a pollutant. So yes, they will tax the air that they breathe. And yes, you are correct saying don't laugh. Yes, they are deliberately making people poor. That John McRae, who's a wonderful man in his 80s now, I first met him 20 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, and he was telling me about, and he showed me the Banker's Almanac, I think it was called, and it showed that what the American banks were trying to do was get government through a combination of legislation and I've forgotten the other word they used. We're trying to make sure that people were tossed out of their houses and became dependent upon the banks. This is what BlackRock's doing, working with the government to try and get social housing in here, because they want a rent for housing for rent scheme, so that then they control you. When they control you, Henry Kissinger, another nasty globalist, died recently at the age of 100. Did so much damage, that man, responsible for so many millions of deaths. He said, when you control food, control energy, control money, you control the continent. That's what he said. They control the money system. They're trying to control the energy system. They're trying to control the food system. They're now telling you what foods you can and can't eat, or should and should not eat. What their goal is ultimately to feed us bugs and tell us what food we can and can't eat. That's where they're headed, a complete control society. Make Australia great again. I'm ex-defence, and I have friends that are still in say the culture has been destroyed. Oh, massive C. You're absolutely correct. The most important thing in an organisation, defence forces, a football club, a company, a business, a mine, a shop, is the culture of that business. And it's determined by the senior people in that business. The defence culture has been shot. It's terrible. The senior leadership, the top brass, are just so woke. They're pushing woke policies. They're being inconsistent. They're hammering the rank and file, the enlisted people. They're taking glory and pinning medals on their own chests and on each other's chests. And that's not a way to build the culture. They're destroying the culture of the Defence Forces, but they're also destroying the culture of the Australian community. We had a wonderful culture where mateship was so important. It was unique in the world. Parts of Britain had it as well. But our culture of mateship and Australian values was very, very strong. Now what they've done, when you have a business, when you have a, say, a mine site, say a company, a corporation, and you've got a strong culture, you want to keep it strong. So the leaders have to continually watch what they're doing to make sure they stay consistent with the culture. Otherwise, people watch them and say, that's shot. So what they do is, if they want to increase the workforce, they do it gradually so that the new people come in, they challenge the culture, and then eventually they slip into being part of the culture. What we've done in this country is brought in so many people from countries with cultures not like Australia at all. We're destroying our culture. That is deliberate. That is deliberate. When you destroy the culture, you destroy the national identity, you destroy the most powerful cohesive force in the country, then you can start bringing in global governance, which is what they're already trying to do and already doing. A lot of our policies from the Liberal and Labor Party are UN WEF policies, World Economic Forum policies. Maurice Strong said he had two aims for life: deindustrialise Western civilization and put in place an unelected socialist global governance. That's what they're trying to do, mate. It's deliberate. Malcolm, thanks, Phil. Malcolm, why do those in the coalition that say they oppose net zero still talk about decarbonising? Oh, I'm glad you can see right through it. Do they believe the CO2 lie? If so, they are no better than Bowen's mob. That's exactly correct. That's exactly correct. What they're trying to do is they haven't got the guts that Pauline, myself, and Tyrone and Warwick have, of saying it as it is. Professor Ian Plimer told me, let's see, when would it have been? Yeah, around 2014, somewhere around there, 10 years ago, that 40% of the Labor Party were against this climate fraud. 40%. And he said around 70%, he estimated, of the Liberal Party, National Party, were against this climate fraud. Slowly but surely, they removed the Conservatives and replaced them with woke people from the left in the Liberal Party. So some people in the Liberal National Party know it's bullshit. They call it out. Very few. Colin Boyce is one of them. He's completely consistent. Completely consistent. Lou O'Brien's another one. Others speak through both sides of their mouth, depends upon where they are. And others are just woke and they're deluded and they don't know that the carbon dioxide claims are a scam. Last question. Nicholas, what a wonderful thing to say to finish it off. Unfortunately, science now follows the money. You're absolutely correct. I'll have some more to say about that in the future. Look, that's the weekly wrap-up from the only opposition party in this country. It's what's being known as the sensible party, the only party serving the Australian people. Enjoy your weekend, and I'm going to leave you with a short video on tax.
Invest their money into an asset. We tax them on half when they sell.
Yeah, we already do that. It's called capital gains tax. Come on, we need something original.
What about money they make in a business?
Company tax, already got that.
What about when they pay their employees? Can we sting them there?
That's payroll tax, and we've been stinging them since 2007.
What if their boss gives them perks like a company car?
Yeah, fringe benefits tax, already getting that. Come on, think.
What about petrol? They can't drive without it.
Yeah, fuel excise tax. Every litre.
What about super? Can we tax their retirement savings?
That's super tax. We tax that coming in, we tax it coming out. We've got that covered.
All right, hear me out. How about we raise GST to 15%?
Now we're talking. I'll write that down, we'll circle back to it. 15%.
What if they just want to buy a nice car? Can we get some of that?
LCT, baby, luxury car tax.
Stamp duty?
Got it.
Council rates.
Every bloody quarter.
More toll roads.
Yeah, we're milking tolls.
Alcohol and cigarettes. Why can't we tax it more?
Yeah, we're taxing that to the moon.
Imports.
That's customs tax. Guys, you're not getting me. I want to tax them on everything. Something that won't ever let them get ahead or even enjoy life anymore.
What about we reintroduce the death tax? Someone dies, they want to pass something down to their kids. We take a cut.
That's absolutely genius. Let's put it on the list and draft it up.